What's up, everybody? Welcome to Podcast Now. I'm Alex, and in this video, I want to talk about what Watch Dogs 4 needs to learn from Watch Dogs Legion. So, kind of paint a picture as to where I guess the path that Watch Dogs 4 should go. Now, we've made videos on what Legion has. Is it a disappointing game? What are people's general opinions on it? Again, to quickly recap that. I mean, is it the greatest game of all time? No. Is it a game that maybe I should have hyped up at? I mean, because I did. I hyped this game up as one of my favorite games, or the games I was most looking forward to this year. Did it deserve that? Not necessarily. I can tell you I'm still having a really fun time with it. I think it's overall a very solid game, and I'm still in the camp of Watch Dogs. I want more Watch Dogs games. But we've also talked about Watch Dogs 4. Will we get a Watch Dogs 4? What does it depend on Legion doing? Now let's put it together. Now let's talk about what it needs to learn from Legion. So, and this is interesting because we've talked about this in past videos. People, I think, are realizing this or recognizing this. I've seen it in comments. I've even seen it. I'm not saying I'm influencing other people, but I've seen kind of these talking points pop up. I think they're common talking points in other videos. What do you do? And that's the biggest thing. Now, what do you do? By that I mean, do you continue down their Nemesis system kind of route? And by Nemesis system route, obviously with Shadow of Mordor, Shadow of War, again, the playing as anybody, recruiting them, they are all basically different. Okay, they all have different skills, different abilities, they just have something that's unique about the individual person, right? Do you continue down that path, which was, and I will flat out say it, was not fully realized, which do we expect it to be? No. I did expect it to be very solid. I think it is solid enough. I think, and again, something I've said before is I think a lot of reviewers early on were kind of bagging on it that it just wasn't good enough, this system. I think it's solid. I don't think it's the greatest thing of all time, and I do think it definitely needs work. It needs more voice acting. I think you quickly see that the voice acting is repeated, that some characters or some voice actors are just flat out absolutely awful. They almost sound like they're mocking the British accent rather than just portraying one. That's my opinion. I'm not calling out any specific actor because I don't know any of their names. But those are things I think come with developing a new system like this. It's raw, it's full of potential, but it's not fully realized. And you couldn't say that, I guess, with Shadow of Mordor with the Nemesis system, because I think it was actually a very good first outing for it, and it only got better. For this, obviously, it needs to be worked on. But the question is, do you do this, or do you go back into hacking? Because what I think everybody has figured out now that we've had a couple days, had a week or so to play Watch Dogs Legion, is this. It couldn't be more clear that they sacrificed hacking for this system. Okay, that's the biggest thing. In fact, this video or an entire video could be made just to that. Do they need to do they need actually there is an answer there. They need to pick one and they need to go for it. And I think with this game, they very clearly picked this new system of playing as anybody, and they left hacking to a little bit more of a generic feel, which nothing necessarily wrong with that. Although the general, always the premise of Watch Dogs for 1 and 2 at least was hacking. That you could hack anything, that the potential there was unlimited. And so they flip-flopped. And we've talked about that, how that's a little weird and how, is that something that maybe has turned people off of Legion? I do think it did. And I think I've seen many people, even on my own channel, saying, I can't get behind any kind of story that lets me play as all, because there's no connection to you. And I agree with that. And I think, honestly, without spoiling it too much, the game itself doesn't really rely on you caring about your main character, because the main character switches, so they have to issue a mechanic where, okay, well, your character doesn't matter all that much. In fact, the emotional aspect, we're going to put it with somebody or something else, again, not to spoil it too much. So, I think when we look at what the game needs to learn from Legion, it does need, I feel like, to pick a path and continue down the road. It seems like they've left hacking, so now you go down this recruiting thing. So what do they need to do? Well, again, I think really embracing variety. So voice acting, continuing to make each character's personality, their looks, their feel, more like their feel, because ultimately you are playing the game. I mean, yeah, when you're having dialogue stuff and dialogue and just anything like that, when you're talking, yeah, the voice and the character's personality and traits, that comes through. But in general, you are playing this game. So continuing to, I think, beef out or buff basically what each character is capable of doing. I would say to go so far as really limiting, like one character can do one thing, but another character cannot do those same things. Now, yeah, you are going to have people that are generally able to do things that other people can do, but the issue with this game is there's something, not everything, but because there are some, specific traits and stuff that are only, directly connected to one person, but there is gear and like basically the tech stuff, right? The stuff you can like upgrade. You can use that on anybody. So you end up being able to make pretty much any different character like the same loadout. You could have them have the same loadout, which does kind of hurt the overall game, right? Because then you're kind of taking away the variety, the diversity of each character. So that's one thing. That's honestly the biggest thing. That's why it took me 5.5 minutes to talk about. That is the biggest thing I think Watch Dogs 4 needs to do. Is it needs to pick if it wants to go back to hacking, it needs to do that and fully embrace it. But I think it seems like they're very much in tune with this. That's fine. I'm completely on board with that. I love this mechanic. I love the idea of this mechanic. Keep going down that path and keep just fully embrace it. Really make these characters feel different, look different. Another thing I want to talk about is the location and the story. So story has never been important to Watch Dogs ever. It's not. It's something that you will literally forget about 5 minutes after you're done with it. It's something you will forget about 2 seconds after if you play like an hour of the story, you turn it off, you will forget about that in like 5 seconds. Okay, and that's again. Do I hold the game? Does that hold the game back? I mean, ultimately, if it had a really good story, I think different people that probably don't even give it the time of day now would like it. But you could argue, would it take away from kind of the sandbox kind of feel that the game has of playing as anybody, or you're able to hack, you're able, the game wants you to kind of be free and do kind of whatever you want, be kind of arcadic in a way, right? The driving is very much like arcadey, like it's got the physics are all over the place. It's nothing like you've ever seen in any other game. And I feel like that's kind of okay because of the game Watch Dogs is. So again, fork in the road. Do you make the story? Do you kind of 180 yourself and say, okay, well, we're actually going to tell a good story now? Again, nothing against them, but the stories, anybody that's worked on the story, if they actually are taking it seriously, they should be fired because none of the stories or characters are ever good enough. And I think everybody, that's like the biggest known fact of Watch Dogs, that the story is just nothing to pay attention to. Maybe it's just me saying it, or maybe I'm too vocal with that, but I feel like I'm going to have, I feel like there's support, in that section. So again, with that, you have to figure out, do you continue with that? But again, if you continue with that, if you continue down with the story, doesn't really matter. Well, you still have to populate the world. You still have to pick a good setting. Now, I think London was a pretty solid thing. I never have driven on the left side of the road. I always am driving on the right side, so that's a little messed up. Obviously, there's a lot of different locations that you can do, but pretty much they're taking, I would say, with Legion, they took more of the Assassin's Creed approach, where it's, and I guess to their credit, they've done that with Watch Dogs 1 and 2 as well, right? Where the city really does feel and look like the actual city that it's portraying. Now, obviously, it's a little bit more in the future. Technology is different, so things are going to be slightly, different, but London, it's pretty cool to go around London. Now, I've never been to London, but other people have even watched me play the game when I was live streaming it. I had some nice things to say about kind of the recreation. So there's a lot of things, to be honest with you, there's a lot of things that they can keep the same. There's a lot of things that they already, that make, maybe not necessarily are like the most amazing in the world, but there's a lot of things that make Watch Dogs unique and makes Watch Dogs Legion unique, and they need to keep that 4-4. I think the biggest thing, the thing I want to end with, is to continue to populate the city, to continue to make their things to do. I think the number one thing I've seen, besides the just not agreeing with and not going to follow them with the playing as anybody approach, which again is up to the person, and that's going to work with some people, it's not going to work with other people, and it's totally cool. The other biggest thing I've seen from people that don't like this game is that it's very boring, that there's not the biggest catches in the world to do. And I would say that I generally agree. I don't think, like, I'm not going around saying like, oh my god, I'm bored to death playing this game, right? But I can agree that when you play this game compared to some other, even like maybe Assassin's Creed, I would even go so far to say that it does feel a little dull. There's only so much you can do. Like the biggest, I guess the thing that's like the most popular is that there's the missions in each borough to do. Obviously going around getting like tech points and stuff, but a lot of it does feel kind of meaningless, like you don't really have to do it. Again, this game I think fully embraced the recruitment missions, like playing as anybody, the big recruitment missions to get like the special operative from each, area of the map. That's where I think they put like the most time and effort. And granted, again, developing a game with a system like this where you could just go down the street and recruit like all 10 people that you see. I mean, I get why that would take away from other things, but I do agree. I think it is pretty apparent that the game excels or is trying to excel in certain parts, and then other parts they kind of just completely, it feels very barren. It feels very uninspired. You know what I mean? Like not very fleshed out. And I think when we're looking at what 4 needs to do is keep the central idea of this, of what they did well, at what people like, or even what has potential, but maybe didn't even work out, right? You keep that. Everything else, the things that you have lacked like you didn't really put your fullest into, that stuff needs to be elevated for 4. So guys, let me know in the comments below, what do you think? What are some improvements you think 4 needs to make when looking at Legion? Make sure, as always, you guys are subscribed, have the bell icon turned on so you know when all these videos go up, and I'll continue talking about Watch Dogs. I'm not going to do it quite as often. When the multiplayer comes out, I will definitely jump back in and be just as active, on YouTube, making videos pretty consistently on it. But more Watch Dogs videos for sure coming to you guys over the coming days, weeks, months, and hopefully years, as long as we get more Watch Dogs games in general, okay? Thank you all for watching, and I hope to see you all on the next video.